to the governor himself, who says he's doing everything he can to make sure none of that happens. Governor, very good to have you. Always a pleasure.
Good to be with you. And you're right. You were there in the height of the recall, right there in person. You saw it firsthand.
I did. And it was amazing to me because I never knew so many people driving by us and in Madison had so many creative ways to curse at you and me. But that was then. This is now. What do you think of what's going on with some call it soul searching in your party? Others say it's much worse.
Well, I think having a healthy debate on important issues is a wonderful thing, and the party's big enough to do that. What concerns me is not the debate. I'm all for that, and I have an opinion myself about national security and a whole lot of other issues out there. What concerns me is a lot of this appears to be moving towards 2016. We've got far too many important elections coming up just next year in 2014. We've got 36 governor races, including 22 Republicans like myself. We've got to maintain the House, which has been doing a great job. And we have a very real opportunity, if we don't squander it, to get the United States Senate back in Republican hands again. That is the important thing. It's time to focus on 2014, not 2016.
You know, there are others, though, who say, sir, in the party that it's not about winning at all costs. It's about whether the win is worth it. In other words, whether you compromise too much to get that victory. What do you make of that?
Well, I think you can win and keep your principles intact. It's certainly what we did. We didn't back away. We ultimately took the case early on, as you know, in 2011. Our poll numbers were probably in the mid-30s, but we kept bringing the point over and over and over again and finally made the case not just to Republicans but to independent and even some discerning Democrat voters in our state that the choice was between the big government union bosses in our case or the hardworking taxpayers, and we made the point that we were standing with the hardworking taxpayers. We won. We can do that same thing in other races around the country. You don't have to compromise our principles, but you can do so in a way that shows you have the courage, and courage is ultimately what leads to victory, I believe.
You know, Governor, sometimes the most well-intended referee gets spiked with the ball. And when you were recently talking about, and I'm just paraphrasing here, try to bring down the heat and just start debating the issues. That raised hackles among some Tea Parties and libertarians who thought you were sort of giving up the fight. I want you to listen to what Mark Levin, a big fan of yours, had to say about your talking about that. This is from Mark Levin.
Well, at least on the Republican side, I think it's too early. I think it's a disservice both to the party and to the country because we've got 36 races for governor next year. 22 of them, including me, are Republican governors.
I think he said you're doing a disservice.
It's too early to do what? To stand on principle and fight? Does he not realize that's what he did when all of us came and supported him? Scott Walker shocks me. Scott Walker, who took on the unions and took them on in Wisconsin, had the support of the Tea Party and the conservative movement, and he showed it could win. Scott Walker could be a prime national example of this, and instead, if what you say is accurate, I only heard a little clip of it, right. It's very sad.
Do you feel that you've been placed in an opposition, Governor? It's like the Hatfields and McCoys. You're either with the one side or with the other, and no one in the middle will be tolerated.
No, I think in this case, and what I heard Mark say with the qualifier there is if he heard it right. I think the important thing to say is I didn't say whether Chris Christie or Rand Paul was right or wrong. I said if they're focusing on 2016, if this is more than just having a policy difference, but it's about setting the stage for campaigns in 2016, that's where they're doing a disservice both to the party and ultimately to the country, because we got to win in 2014 so that whomever the nominee is, either he or she in 2016 for the party, can ultimately make the case that we're going to win, and in doing so, base it on principle, so that in 2017, when you've got a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican President, we can actually do the kind of big, bold things we've done in Wisconsin and in other states across this country.
But you know, maybe you're trying to deal with this in a diplomatic, gentlemanly way, but I've talked to all of these guys, Governor, and there's some bad blood between some of them, and I'm wondering if it goes beyond 2016 to actually a battle for the soul of the party akin to, and even I'm too young to remember this, the 1964 struggle, the Goldwater-Rockefeller battle within the party that really wasn't resolved as far as electing a conservative, if you think about it, until 1980 when Ronald Reagan got the job. Do you think that that's what Republicans risk here, that in this battle for who they are, they lose a lot of elections along the way?
Well, I think a lot of this focus is on national security, and certainly it's an important issue for homeland security, for civil liberties, for protecting the very freedoms we are fighting for here and across the world. But,
by the way, on that count, if you don't mind, I've asked others the same question. Where are you in that? I mean, Chris Christie, as you know, has said, look, he has to talk to the families and the friends of 9/11 victims all the time, and that we can't, sort of debate these surveillance issues. This is about life and death, and that matters to him. Rand Paul comes up with me the next day and says, well, there are things we are as a country that we can't compromise and sort of, slough over the guise of keeping us safe. Where does Scott Walker stand?
You know me, I'm a straightforward guy, but in this case, I'll tell you quite frankly, I think they're both right. I think on one hand, we need to make sure that we never have a 9/11 again. I don't want for my kids and my family or any other family in this country to go through what people went through on 9/11 in New York.
I understand that, but you think we're going too far now with these revelations now that they're taking thousands of people's emails and phone calls and erroneously linking them to terror when in fact they're not, and that's just the half.
Absolutely. Well, Neil, that's my point. I think on one hand, you can be diligent in making sure that we continue to do things that protect our homeland from those sorts of attacks. But by the same token, we need to be diligent in protecting the very freedoms that are the essence of this great country.
But you're not in the Rand Paul. But I want to be very clear. I'm sorry, sir, but you're not in the Rand Paul camp that says stop it, stop all of it. This is crazy.
No, but I think you have to rein it in, which is where I think the two aren't mutually exclusive. Protecting homeland security and protecting personal freedoms and liberties are not mutually exclusive. And the debate so far between Governor Christie and Senator Paul has appeared to be that you've got to be on one end or the other, where I think I and most Americans believe you can do both.
Governor, you have an impressive resume, having run Wisconsin. You didn't come in there to start a fight, but between the right to work battle and everything else, you have changed not only that state, but a region. So many other states going your way, take on the unions, risking great voter wrath, not so much recall elections as you did, but a lot. That would position you well for a presidential run. A lot of people say they'd like to see you make a presidential run. What do you think?
Well, again, in our case, as I mentioned before, we've got a lot to focus on 2014. I've got to be reelected. I want to see Republicans gain more seats in my state legislature. I want to see more Republicans elected as governor to the House and ultimately get the Senate back. So that's really where I'm going to stay focused. But back for a second to your point about the party being united, I think when you look at tackling the fiscal and economic crisis that our states and ultimately our country faces, that's what got so many Republicans elected in 2010. That's what can continue to see that surge going forward if we stay focused on fiscal and economic issues that ultimately are about reform. We didn't just balance our budget. We reformed our states. We reformed our local governments. That put us back on the right track, and it's why our unemployment rate is down, jobs are up, our budget is balanced, unlike states like Illinois, where Democrats have taken them in exactly the wrong direction.
So it wouldn't matter to you, again, if you'll indulge me, whether Paul Ryan ran for the presidency. That wouldn't influence you deciding on that issue, if it were to come to pass.
In the end, as you know, Neil, I was on your show talking about this. In fact, actually, probably in this very same studio as I sit tonight in Milwaukee, talking about being one of the chief leaders of the Paul Ryan fan club. I'm supportive of Paul Ryan in just about anything he does, be it in the House or anywhere else out there. He's one of the truly courageous people in this country, not just in Washington. But I'm going to stay focused on 14 and what I can do to help Paul keep his majority, get some new allies and friends in the United States Senate, and make sure there's enough governors across the country to make sure we can continue our reform not only in Wisconsin, but in states all across this great country, because that's where the reform is.
But it wouldn't matter to you. I mean, you like Paul Ryan, there's no doubt, and he feels the same about you, but it wouldn't preclude you from running just because you're a good friend and someone you admire. We're running for the presidency.
Well, in that case, it's just something that is too far into the future for me and anybody else to be talking about right now. I'm focused on the next few years and what we can do in Wisconsin, how we can help encourage other states to take on some of those big, bold reforms to get our country going again by getting our states going in the right direction.
Okay, I clearly failed. I thought I'd get you tired and you'd slip up and say something, but that didn't happen. But
well, Neil, I can tell you simply in the city that's the home of Harley Davidson, I'd love to be the president of the Harley Davidson Motor Company. But I can't be the president of Harley Davidson, so we'll see what the future holds beyond that.
Governor, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much. Scott Walker.
Good.